Nature has stopped running away from us and started hunting us back. It began with one field shredded in a single night. No storm, no fire, just deep, violent scars in the earth, as if something massive had torn to the dead of night. Farmers called it animals. They were wrong. What they found the next morning was a nightmare. Entire crops flattened, heavy steel fences ripped apart like paper, and livestock simply gone. But the real horror wasn't damage. It was a strategy. This wasn't a random attack. It was an organized invasion. Thousands of moving shadows are now crossing our borders, blocking roads, and crushing everything in their path. Millions of wild boars are spreading faster than we can kill them, and they've stopped being afraid. They are learning. They are adapting. They are expanding from the rural wilderness to the very edges of our cities. But just as we began to understand the threat, the game changed. A second predator has silently entered the war. Smarter, more patient, watching us in the dark. This isn't a hunt anymore. This is a battle for territory. And the real danger? It hasn't even stepped into the light yet. By the time the sun rose over the farmland, the scale of destruction was impossible to ignore. Acres of corn lay flattened into mud, irrigation lines were torn apart, and deep trenches marked where heavy bodies had rooted through the soil overnight. This was no random movement. It was organized. Entire sounders of wild boars had swept like a moving wall, leaving nothing behind but ruin. Farmers walked the fields in silence, calculating losses that would take months to recover, if recovery was even possible. But the real fear wasn't the damage. It was the speed. These animals were multiplying faster than anyone could contain. A single female could produce 2 litters a year, each with several piglets. Within months, a small group could become an unstoppable force. Authorities had tried conventional methods: night patrols, fencing, even limited hunting permits. But nothing worked for long. The boars adapted quickly, changing routes, moving deeper into cover, and returning only when it was safe. They learned human patterns, avoided danger, and struck where defenses were weakest. That intelligence made them far more dangerous than their size alone. In several regions, collisions with vehicles began to rise. Drivers traveling through dark rural roads suddenly found massive animals crossing without warning. The impact of hitting a 200-pound boar at speed was often catastrophic. Vehicles were destroyed. Lives were lost. As pressure mounted, a coordinated response became inevitable. Professional hunters, local authorities, and farmers formed joint teams, combining knowledge and resources. This wasn't about sport anymore. It was about survival. Large cage traps were deployed along known movement paths, carefully placed where herds were most likely to travel. Each trap required precision. One mistake, one wrong scent, and the entire herd would vanish before entering. Bait was laid gradually, drawing them closer over several nights, building confidence until the animals no longer sensed danger. When darkness fell, the fields became silent again. But beneath that silence, movement had already begun. Shadows gathered at the edge of crops. The first boar stepped forward, cautious but driven by hunger. Then another, and another. Within minutes, dozens crowded into the narrow space, unaware of what was about to happen. Then, without warning, the mechanism snapped shut. Metal slammed against metal, echoing through the night. Panic erupted. Massive bodies crashed against the bars, tusks striking steel, the entire trap shaking under force. But there was no escape. For the first time, control seemed possible. Yet even as the traps filled, something else was happening beyond the fields. The animals that escaped were changing their behavior. They were becoming more aggressive, more unpredictable, and far more dangerous. Because out there in the darkness beyond the farmland, another hunter had already begun to move. While the trapped herds were secured and the immediate damage slowed, the situation outside the cages was becoming even more dangerous. The boars that had escaped were no longer moving in predictable patterns. They had learned. Every failed capture, every distant gunshot, every scent left behind had made them more cautious. Smaller groups began breaking away from the main sounders, spreading into new territories where traps had not yet been placed. They avoided open ground, moved through dense cover, and shifted their activity deeper into the night. What had once been a large, visible threat was now becoming something far more difficult to track, a scattered, intelligent force adapting in real time. That's when the second phase of the operation began. Traps alone were no longer enough. The remaining boars had to be pursued. Before dawn, teams regrouped along the outer ridgelines, preparing for a coordinated push. Hunting dogs were released first, their noses low to ground as they searched for fresh tracks left in the damp soil. For a few tense minutes, there was nothing. Then a sudden bark cut through the silence. Another followed. The signal was clear. Contact had been made. The forest erupted into motion. The dogs moved fast, weaving through trees, forcing the hidden boars out of their cover. A group burst from the underbrush, sprinting across a narrow clearing. Their speed was shocking, their bodies cutting through the terrain with raw power. Hunters raised their rifles, but this was no easy shot. The animals zigzagged, using every dip and shadow to their advantage. Timing had to be perfect. One shot rang out, then another. A large boar stumbled mid-run and collapsed, but the rest kept moving, vanishing into thicker vegetation. Then came the moment no one could fully prepare for. A deep, guttural roar echoed from the trees, followed by the sound of something charging. Not fleeing, charging. A massive boar burst forward, tusks gleaming, eyes locking on the nearest hunter. There was no hesitation, no fear, only aggression. The distance closed rapidly. Seconds felt like nothing. A quick adjustment, a steady aim, and a single decisive shot stopped the charge just in time. The ground shook as the animal hit the earth, dust rising into the cold air. But the encounter changed everything. These were no longer animals simply searching for food. They were reacting, defending, learning. Every engagement carried real risk. As the hunt continued, teams adjusted their approach, spreading wider, maintaining safer distances, communicating more carefully. The dogs remained essential, holding boars in place just long enough for a clean, controlled shot. Each successful takedown reduced immediate pressure, but it was clear the operation was far from over, because deeper into the wilderness, beyond the farmland and forest edges, another challenge was emerging, one that didn't move in herds, one that didn't rely on numbers, and one that could outthink almost every trap placed in its path. As the final phase of the operation began, the landscape itself seemed to shift. The forest grew quieter, but it wasn't the calm of safety. It was the silence of something watching, something calculating every movement made by the hunters. The scattered boars retreated deeper, but they were no longer the only threat moving through the terrain. Tracks found along the outer ridges told a different story. Smaller prints, lighter steps, but far more deliberate. The kind of movement that didn't rely on strength but intelligence. The kind that waited, observed, and adapted faster than anything else in the wild. The focus slowly turned from brute force to strategy. This time, it wasn't about surrounding or driving herds into traps. It was about patience. Electronic callers were set in position, their speakers hidden among dry grass and broken branches. The sound that followed was soft at first, a faint cry, almost lost in the wind. Then it grew sharper, more desperate. A wounded animal, an easy opportunity, exactly the kind of signal that could draw on a predator without raising suspicion. Minutes passed, then something moved. Through the thermal scope, a faint shape appeared at the edge of the clearing. It didn't rush forward. It stopped, watched, tested the wind. Every step it took was careful, calculated, almost silent. This wasn't like the wild boars. This was something far more cautious. The hunter remained completely still, controlling every breath, knowing that even the smallest mistake could end the encounter instantly. The sound played again, slightly louder this time. The figure moved closer. At 70 meters, it paused once more. The eyes reflected faintly, scanning the surroundings, searching for anything out of place. Seconds stretched endlessly. The hunter adjusted the aim, slow and precise, aligning the reticle exactly where it needed to be. There would be no second chance. Then the moment arrived. A single shot broke the silence. The figure dropped, but the forest didn't return to calm. From deeper within, distant movement followed. Others reacting, spreading, disappearing into terrain before they could be seen. This was never just one. It never is. As the sun rose higher, the operation came to an end. Traps were checked, equipment packed, and the team slowly moved back across the land they had fought to protect. The immediate threat had been reduced. The fields would recover. The farms would breathe again, at least for now, but the tracks remained. New ones, old ones, crossing paths between fields, forests, and the edges of human settlements. A reminder that this wasn't a battle with a clear finish. It was a cycle, adaptation against adaptation, instinct against strategy. Because in the wild, nothing truly disappears. It only waits. So the real question isn't whether the hunt was successful. It's how long the balance will hold before everything begins again.